Hey Future Managers, welcome to Ethics Week. This is one of my favorite weeks because for me it has a great deal of personal meaning to me, and I'm really looking forward to going over some foundational things with ethics for you, and I know you're going to learn some more about ethics in some later classes, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so first of all, how are we defining ethics? So you guys can think about ethics as not necessarily being legal, because ethics begin where laws and regulations end. So your personal ethics, your business ethics, your ethics as a manager, they're beginning where laws and regulations end. I mentioned in the overview video, there's a lot of gray area out there, and your ethics are going to help you figure out how personally you're going to navigate through those gray areas and figure out what's going to be black and what's going to be white for you. Alright, because I want to be fully transparent to you guys. A lot of times when we get into business, we are given by our managers, as part of our jobs, goals and objectives. We talked a little bit about that in earlier weeks. And when we're trying to strive to meet those goals and objectives, some of them are stretch goals, which are meant to stretch and challenge us, and some may not always be realistic. So let me just kind of share a little bit. So when I was a sourcing manager, one thing that I ran into is usually sourcing year over year, if you buy a lot of something, you can negotiate the price down a little bit, or if you can simplify the design, you can bring things down a little bit, but usually things you can negotiate down 2, 3, even 4% a year, very, very small. Well, we came on with a new vice president who basically said, listen, the business is in trouble, we're not making any money in our new deals, we need everybody in sourcing to take the price of everything down 10%. And this doesn't happen 1 year, or 2 years, or 3 years. Every year, he said, I want the price to be dropped every year by 10%. So you can imagine the kind of stress that puts on the company because it's just not realistic or sustainable in the long term. So that added a lot of pressure to me as a manager, a lot of pressure for me to pass on to my buyers. This was a serious goal and objective, and I had to report every single week in front of the entire company about if I had anything where I spent more than I had bought the week before. I had to share it out with the entire company why I was spending more money than I had previously. That added a lot of pressure. So I had goals and objectives, I had pressure. If I didn't perform, I would have to share it in front of the entire company, and weekly there was other people that were getting just raked over the coals by the entire company that were on these morning meetings all the way up to the vice president about what's going on. So when you're under those kinds of pressure and constraints and you have these goals and objectives, it really can make you ethically vulnerable. So you taking the time to figure out what your own core morals and values are right now is going to help you figure out how you can navigate those kinds of situations. So I wanted to share this verse with you really quick. It says, do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals. I cannot attest to this enough. I've seen many people come into the company. Sometimes they're bright-eyed employees, much like you guys will be right out of college, who are very idealistic in the way that businesses are run. And then quickly, if you surround yourself with people that are doing improper things or maybe a little bit on the ethical sketch side of things, very quickly it can disrupt your own ethical framework if you're not really formed into where you are yourself. So be really careful who you guys surround yourself with. I think especially now in college, you guys are building friendships that are going to last you the rest of your life. But think about and be intentional about who you surround yourself with. Surround yourself with good company, people that are going to grow you, invest in you, build you up. Those are the kinds of people that you want, because you want to not only have your personal ethical framework not only preserved, but encouraged and challenged and grow by those people you hang around. Okay, so let me share these 4 terms with you guys. This is straight out of your textbook. And I'll move myself down here. All right, so there's 4 main views of ethical behavior that people usually take. And so let's go through them really quick. So first of all, this is individualism. This is basically saying, hey, I'm looking out for number 1. What's going to benefit me the best in the long run? That's what I'm going to do. That's individualism. You don't care about anybody else but yourself and how you're going to get ahead. I've had a lot of those people as coworkers. They would steal work from someone else and they would advance themselves, claim it as their own so they could climb the corporate ladder. That's the individualism view. A behavior is ethical under the justice view of moral reasoning when people are treated impartially and fairly. Just think about justice, impartial and fair, according to legal rules and standards. All right, so when you think about adjusting, we're trying to think, hey, how can we be impartial and fair to everybody? Because that's going to be just. So you want to make sure no one has an unfair advantage. The utilitarian view is a little different. But it's one that I've seen rising in popularity in recent years, and it's up to you to decide if you think it's a good thing or a bad thing. But the utilitarian view basically says, hey, listen, what's going to deliver the greatest good to the greatest number of people, because that's what we're going to do. Problem with the utilitarian view is, okay, you may be delivering the greatest good to the greatest number of people. That could be 51% of the people. What happens to the other 49%? All right, so that's the utilitarian view. And then last are the moral rights view. The moral rights basically says behavior is ethical when it's respecting and protecting the fundamental rights of people. What are the fundamental rights of people? It can go back as far as John Locke, which is back in England in the 15th, 16th century, and Thomas Jefferson in the founding days of our country, who basically said all people have rights to life, liberty, and fair treatment under law. Okay, so those are the four main necessary views of ethical behavior. So let's put this into practice. I'm going to give you guys a bit of a dilemma. All right, so say we have Mr. Peabody, and Mr. Peabody's business has struggled since COVID. His sales month to month have at times been in the red, and his year-to-date sales are down 40%. But keep in mind, in the past, Mr. Peabody's business has done very well. Mr. Peabody cannot continue on like this. He has too many employees and not enough work. He must make a decision on what to do with his business. Dun dun dun! What do we do now? All right, so here's some options for you guys. What does he do? He can fire 40% of his employees to save the jobs of the other 60%. That sounds like a good option, right? You're saving the job of 60% of the employees. That sounds stellar, all right? But you can fire the other 40%, but you're saving 60%. That's the utilitarian view at work, okay? He's saving 60, but sacrificing 40. That's the utilitarian view. Okay. Second option Mr. Peabody has is he can cut all his employee hours by 40%, all right? But all employees still keep their jobs. So this is really becoming a more equitable view as we're taking into approach, if you want to think back to Mary Parker Follett, and how she was talking about the community. He would go in front of the employees and say, hey, listen, sales are down 40%. I can either fire 40% of you, or we can all take 40% decreases in our pay until this is over to keep the business afloat. And you know what? You'd be surprised how often that happens. I worked for a church years and years ago, and we did that same basic thing, like, hey, listen, we are having some tough finances, and we need everybody to take a 20% decrease in pay, which basically meant you get Fridays off. And everyone was really happy to do that. They did it for about a year and a half before they were able to bring everyone back full time. But that's definitely an option, cutting all employees' hours by 40%, but all employees keep their jobs. That is the justice view. Fair and equal treatment for all. Everybody's taking that 40% pay cut. Third scenario, he can sell the business while he's ahead. He was successful in past years. He still has 60% of his sales coming in. Sell it now and go retire to Palm Springs. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? Okay, well, if he does that, he'd be following the individualistic view, all right? He's watching out for number one, doesn't care about anybody but himself and his long-term interests, and he's got Palm Springs in his sights. That is the individualistic view. And then the last option is you can fire all the manufacturing workers, get out of working things in the U.S. altogether, and outsource all the work to Southeast Asia. And I didn't put this in here, but there's a lot of human slavery that goes on in Southeast Asia. I'm not saying this would be where Mr. Peabody's work would go, but he would lose that transparency and that visibility of seeing what's going on in his daily operations by outsourcing out Southeast Asia. So very likely, he could be, having a company do the work that is putting human slavery into practice. I know that I've seen it personally in my career, and it happens quite a bit. So that's definitely a dilemma as well. And that is the moral rights view, okay? If he is outsourcing it, doesn't necessarily care who makes his products, whether they're free or enslaved or indebted, doesn't necessarily care, all right? That is violating the moral rights view. All right, so there's just a quick example of an ethical dilemma for you. I'm gonna share one more quick thing in this video for you guys, and I'm not gonna go too much in depth on this because I gave you guys a really fun YouTube video that that talks about Kohlberg's level of ethics. But I'm gonna just put this up here for you guys. You're welcome to read it. And I'm just gonna tell you guys a quick story from my time at GE. I gave you guys some articles about GE, and they're very, we called it aggressive accounting practices. All right, and it's something that I ran into quite a bit when I was there. So I'll start off by saying, so when I was working in supply chain, we had to report up on all of our numbers. So we had to be able to basically say, hey, listen, here's what I expect to be paying this next year. And I shared earlier with you guys that, hey, we had to keep a 10% cost decrease year over year for quite a few years that I was there. That wasn't always achievable. And so it became very prevalent within several different teams to be able to just put the numbers down 10%, slides under the radar, and then what happens is their real end of year numbers come in and there's large discrepancies. Okay, so hey, here's what we're actually spending, and then here's what we said we're going to spend. And then there's this big gap. Okay? So that's been going on. So I inherited a team and we had that issue. And first I looked at it, I'm like, there's no way that they actually were like giving real numbers when they gave their projected numbers for the year. There's no way these were real. I'm like, they were trying to impress somebody. And I said, that's it. The buck stops with me. I said, I'm not going to do what everybody else is doing. I'm going to say these numbers are going to be right from here on out because I'm putting my name on them and I'm going to be responsible for these numbers. So I said, all right, we're just going to have horrible numbers this year, guys, but they're going to be real numbers. We're going to be the only ones in the company that do this, but I will speak to it because I'm going to set you guys up for success in future years and not set you guys up for failure because this is a major problem with how we report because nobody was comparing to say, hey, are we actually spending what we ought to? Because there are two different accounting systems, two different teams, and nobody was talking to the other one because our systems didn't talk to each other because we're using old DOS programs. Don't even get me started. So I went and did that the very first time, went ahead and put that through and created a lot of stir, and I took the flak for it, not my team. And then we had another manager come in the next year. All right, and so I once again came through and I said, listen, so this is how I'm doing my reporting of my numbers, everything's real. And so I had a couple of different, we call them commodities, a couple of different areas where buyers would, how do I say this? Like they were trouble, like they had like either things cost a lot of money because they didn't have, not a lot of people in the world could make these very specialty equipment, or it had a very special material on it, the price went up, there was different things. And so I said, I'm not just gonna say across the board that everybody's gonna get cost out. Like, these items are costing more money. I've worked with their suppliers, I've validated it all out, this is why. I would go and work with, and then I'd go and talk to my manager about it, and he'd be like, oh, we'll just report it, what it needs to be for the numbers to report to manager. And like, I can't do that, because like, this is gonna come back down on me at some point. All right, so I went to my 1/1, so not my manager, my manager's manager, and the way it worked out, it wasn't necessarily his manager. It was like another manager at that 1/1 level. I said, hey, listen, here's what's going on with my numbers. These are some bigger issues. And my job is to say, hey, listen, we need higher level support on this. We need the vice president to get involved on these problems. But this is why, you're going to be seeing this discrepancy number on there, real number. So anyhow, my manager wanted me to change the number. I said, I'm not going to change it. It's the real number. Well, guess what happened? We were reporting out the numbers in front of the entire company. I'd submitted my slides for my team to my manager and reporting in front of the entire company. And sure enough, he had changed my slide to have incorrect numbers. And I had already previewed, everybody needed to preview it, but he was trying to slide under the rug. He wanted to basically live at that social conventional level, and he wanted to avoid punishment, pre-conventional level. He, not from me, but from other people, had gotten bit a couple different times by the vice president by having numbers that were high out of order, and so he didn't want to be on trouble again, so he changed my numbers. So even though I had talked to people at a higher level and said, hey, here's what's going to happen, nope, he went and changed my numbers. And so as soon as we got off that call, my phone started blowing up. Like, what happened to your numbers, Mandy? Did you end up changing your numbers, reporting it out? And I said, no, this is what happened. My manager changed my numbers. Here's the slide that I actually made and sent to him. And I sent that up. And then I also sent up my backup data. And then I also showed the point that we couldn't compare our two systems and that I was trying to correct errors between the real numbers and these fake numbers that were being presented. And I was actually able to start bringing about a change to help those two systems and those two processes and teams align so that we can compare what we were projecting with what we were actually spending for the very first time that had never happened before, and it helped people to start being honest. If I hadn't stepped out and said, listen, I'm not going to give numbers that aren't my own or numbers that aren't realistic or numbers that are going to get and get my team in trouble. If I hadn't stepped out and done that post-conventional saying that's not right, I wouldn't have had that kind of success changing the system. But if I just gone with everybody else and done the conventional things, slid under the rug, looked out for number one, my boss was really angry with me after that, because he didn't know that I had gone to his manager and talking about that, and he ended up getting talked to about it. So, guys, it pays to be ethical, it pays to know what you're about, and to stand up for justice and stand up for what you believe in, because it's going to help. And so now I'm fingers crossed, thankful, and I'm hoping that new generations of supply chain managers will not have to worry about whether they have to report out ethical numbers or not, because the real numbers will be in front of them now. So anyhow, that's a little bit about ethics for you guys. Go ahead and check out the next video.